Welcome to COLDITZ Castle, finally for a second time. And I would like to tell you the story of our old castle. And I know now you're especially interested in the Second World War, what happened here in COLDITZ. And I think you know a little bit about it, that COLDITZ was a POW camp. It was Oflag IVc. Perhaps you know the word Oflag, what does it mean? The German word, it's a short word, Offizierslager, officers' camp. Officers and orderlies arrested here, and between 1940 and 43 it was a special camp for the best in escaping, and that's why more German guards than in other camps. And the first courtyard you can see here, this was the Germans' courtyard. In that building, the commander's office and everywhere offices of German Wehrmacht officers, and most of the 150 guards here in COLDITZ Castle, they had their accommodations in that building, and some private flats of the commander's family in here. And I would like to explain you one escape route. It happened in October 1942. 3 British and 1 Canadian let themselves lock in the prisoner's kitchen. And at night they moved across these roofs. This was a canteen during the war. Across the yard, and in the museum you could see different keys. They had a key for that door there, but it didn't fit because the guards had changed the lock. And the prisoners had to go back to the corner, and downstairs in the corner there's a small door to the cellar, and with the help of a skeleton key they could open it, and it was really by chance that they discovered a small ventilation shaft without iron bars. They could pass it. They walked from COLDITZ to Pelich, which is a very small village near COLDITZ, and then by train via Zwickau to Switzerland. It was successful for all 4 of them, and you know this is a very good percentage. When you think of the long trip to Switzerland, more than 400 kilometers, and everywhere Gestapo in the trains at the stations, they were checked and very often captured and sent back to COLDITZ Castle. And perhaps you have read it, most of the English-speaking officers who escaped from here, they were captured and sent back. The problem was the language. During the war, lots of Dutchmen, Polish, Belgians and French worked in Germany for a certain time, but no English-speaking worker here, and that's why the Gestapo captured them and sent them back. But the interesting story here, last summer a documentary was made in COLDITZ Castle, and 4 young COLDITZ men had to play extras here, to play stuntmen. They showed the escape route here via this courtyard, but I can tell you nobody of them passed the ventilation shaft, and I really want you to see it, because this is a very small shaft in such a corner, and they described it in their books. They had to pass it backwards without uniform, without anything, and it was good luck. Yeah. It was really very often by chance when they could find a good way to the freedom. But I would like to explain you more escape routes from COLDITZ. Let's go that way, please. You see, this is the way to the main courtyard of COLDITZ Castle, which was the prisoners' courtyard during the war, and in front of the courtyard an extra building used as an extra guardhouse. You see here part of the thick walls which are everywhere around the castle, and you know, during the war, barbed wire, searchlights and 4 roll calls here. In COLDITZ and other camps only 2, and more guards than in other camps. And they called it escape proof, they called it a special camp, but in the end they had to admit it was the escape academy here in COLDITZ. And you know, the main reason, when you speak to former guards or to former prisoners from COLDITZ Castle, you always can hear they put together all these officers who escaped from other camps before. So really the best escaping brains, most different experiences here in COLDITZ, and that's why more than 200 escape attempts from this castle. perhaps you remember a movie, a series, or you remember a book you have read about COLDITZ. The first tunnel under COLDITZ Castle, it was the canteen tunnel, which was dug in winter 1940-41. But because of the rock under our castle, all the tunnels were unsuccessful. The German guards discovered them. And when they discovered the canteen tunnel in that corner, Eggers, the security officer, he asked the prisoners how did they manage it all the time to get in the canteen. And then Kenneth Lockwood, he told them, do you know the story of Alice in Wonderland? She could eat something and became such a small person and she could walk through the legs. The way how they answered sometimes. It's interesting to read the German side here. Eggers, Reinhold Eggers, the security officer, wrote a book about COLDITZ Castle, the German story, and it's really a very objective book. Yeah, perhaps you know. Well, that building, the kitchen. In the corner there is some senior officers' quarters, showers, orderlies, and in front of the building there's the delousing shed. And downstairs in that corner, 6 solitary confinement cells, punishment when they try to escape 3-4 weeks solitary confinement cell. And here in this courtyard I would like to show you the greatest escape attempt from COLDITZ Castle. It was one of the tunnels and the widest and biggest tunnel under our castle. It was a French tunnel. Let's go that way, please. Well, I told you, some of the French officers had their quarters above the chapel. And from there they broke a hole to the clock tower, you can see there. And on the right side of the tower, inside, there's a small shaft for the old pendulums, and they used it to get down to the ventilation shaft and then down to the wine cellar. Don't worry, we will take another way, but we go down to the Well, we are here in the wine cellar, and perhaps you can come a bit near. You can't understand it. Can you come here or stand behind the face?
Read it like my face.
Is there anybody else outside?
No, that's
yeah?
okay.
It's okay. And first the French used the ventilation shaft to get down to this cellar here. And here on the right side you can see this shaft. And in the middle of the shaft on the right side there was a hole to the clock tower. So remember please, from their quarters to the clock tower, down for the shafts here to the cellar. And one of the French, a mining engineer, planned the tunnel, and it goes from here to the chapel, and then it went to the park. And first, this wall here is new. Original big pieces of rock. It looked similar to the other wall there, and so they could use a big piece of rock to hide the entrance. And the very old mining method of the old Romans, they heated the stones with the help of oil lamps and candles, splashed them with water, and so the stones cracked. The whole tunnel was 44 meters long. It took them 8 months. 10 meters before they could finish it, it was discovered. And the problem, I told you, the rock under COLDITZ Castle, and of course the long way back, they had to transport all the stones, all the rubble, almost back to their quarters in the attic under the floorboards. In these old buildings there were always 2 floors, and they put the rubble under the floorboards. And it was a security sergeant who discovered the camouflage in the clock tower upstairs, and so the guards discovered the way down. And the French who dug the tunnel had to fill the tunnel in again, and with lots of concrete. So it was completely closed, and only in 1890 the tunnel was opened again, and one part is not original. When you see the tunnel, there's one part which is too narrow, it's too small. When you look down there, you still can see a part of the filling. This is concrete, this is not original rock. So during the war, it was bigger, it was deeper, you can see there. the tunnel was planned for a mass escape, as many officers as fast as possible, so it had to be very wide, very big. And the original pieces of rock and all the rubble, we could find it 50 years later. In January 1993, workmen started to restore the roof. You could see the building with the scaffoldings around it. And they had to take away walls and floorboards in the upper floor. And they came to me and asked me, can you explain us how do these stones come up in the building? Yeah, I have seen it. The whole floor of the whole building here, it was full of stones and earth of tunnels under COLDITZ. There was a big pipe in the courtyard, containers of rubble of stones we had to transport away 50 years later. And this was the time. It's very interesting to prove today all these stories, because I know when you read a book or when you see a movie, you very often ask, can you believe it or not? You can believe it. And even if you see films about people in prisons, that they are able to do a lot. And this was the time, 50 years later, when we could prove the story of the dry rot and the story of Arthur's home. And we are here in a big wine cellar, and it was in this building, but in the upper floor, just between the roof and their quarters wall, the prisoners arranged to hide not only Arthur's home, Arthur, the name of a radio to receive news from home. This home here, it was never discovered during the war. Wow. And we took one wall on this side away, and we could see it for the very first time. On the desk you can see it here, switchboards, lamps. We could find books, newspapers, parts of notebooks, parts of uniforms, even a letter, how they started to write a working permission of a German firm. We need this on this workman, this and this time here in Germany. And even cigarette packages, cigarette ends of the wartime, and I asked how could they smoke in such a small room just under the roof. They lived quite dangerously, but I can tell you they have done more dangerous things than smoking just under the roof, because I would like to tell you, this was really interesting for me, the story of the dry rot. Mr. Petzold, one of the workmen today, had to check all the timbers in the attic, and he noticed there's not only wet rot, which is normal when the roof is not okay, but also dry rot, 2 parts in the attic. And he said somebody must have helped, and I know this was Captain Elliot, during the war, his greatest wish to destroy the whole camp, the whole castle here. And he spoke to an architect, and he said you can do it over a long period of time with the help of dry rot. You have to cultivate dry rot. And suddenly there were everywhere marmalade tins in their quarters with these little cultures. You know, they cultivated the rottenness, and then when it was good enough, so they put them between the timbers in the attic, and in Pat Reed's book you can read where no doubt they still repose. He wrote it in the 50s. It was true, because in 1993 we could find it 2 parts in the attic, totally rotten by dry rot here. Oh. This was good. You can have a look.
This was their hidden radio station. It was right here.
Oh.
Underneath the eaves, see, right in here. And this is the wall they took off to expose it. And it was all the way it was left. Nobody had found it.
Chapel here in COLDITZ Castle, and which was used not only in the Middle Ages for religious services, but also during the wartime. Only in 1968 it became a storeroom for building material. That's why a bad condition today. But it looked better, and during the war the prisoners had their own portraits amongst them. The sermons were held in the in the natural languages here in the chapel, and very often in the courtyard. And you know, they used the chapel for their tunnel, and you could see the entrance in the wine cellar. And now they came up in that corner, they came up with the help of rope ladders, and in the whole chapel there was a wooden floor. You see now the stone floor, there was another false floor, wooden floor, and between the two floors enough space to get through without digging. From the corner, straight on to the next corner, 6 meters deep, and under the wall to the park where they had to dig again as the park was guarded. And the problem in the chapel, this was not rock but very old dry wood, oak. It can be as hard as stone, and there were 7 beams. See here, one of these 7 beams. Yeah, and now the prisoners had to cut them through. Primitive tools, little saws and kitchen knives here. And you can imagine it's like failing your nails when you use a kitchen knife for such old dry wood. 14 cuts, which are still original here because they had to use this way. You can see some photographs. There's one of ours between the 2 floors and the way and the falls, the wooden floor. And you see some other escape material. They needed a mat for transporting the rubble. You see it in the corner, and a long rope made from linen bed sheets. And you see lamp holders made from tins, or you say cans, yeah? Empty cans. The International Red Cross sent them food parcels, and normally the prisoners were not allowed to get the empty cans, but they managed to get them and could use them in several ways, not only for digging, but for producing a lamp holder or an air pipe in the tunnel, one can after another. And so this was their air pipe. And in the museum you could see a wooden machine in the corner. This was the compressor to pump the air here in the tunnel. You see, in the showcase we have some other tools and cans we could find here. And in this corner here you can see some material. I told you the tunnel was filled in again with other material, concrete, and lots of empty cans what we could find here. They used the chapel, and it was a nice chapel. Also you see the balconies don't sealed because of the old ceiling you can see here, but when it is in better condition with the sacristy, yeah, and altar and so, and the benches here, it was really a nice little chapel, a special chapel. Yeah.
What is the future of the castle? Is it to extend it as a hospital, or to?
No, the patients will move into new homes in 96, 97, and until then the state, the owner now, they have to find new users. People who would like to use it, investors here. The state would like to use a part, but they can't afford the whole castle. It's simply too big. This was a problem in the Middle Ages. It's still the same problem today. Yeah, COLDITZ is a small town, and for such a town, normally the castle is too big. So you have to use it in another way, not only as a museum, but also in a way how you get a certain amount of money.
Mm-hmm. So the future is less secure than it is at the moment, or the moment with the hospital that protects the castle.
Yeah, but I must say, not the hospital. They don't do anything for the buildings. It's the state at the moment who has to keep the buildings here, and that's why they repaired the roof, they restored the roof. If they have got the money, they will restore another roof on the next year, but it depends. It's very expensive.
Is this sort of balcony unique in Germany to COLDITZ, or is this a normal way of having a chapel?
It's
with balconies?
the size is not normal,
No.
yeah, but you see quite often balconies in different churches. Yeah. It's a very big because 3 parts here. This is quite a lot. Yeah, normally you have 2 floors extra balconies, and it always depended on
the parish.
Parish. Yeah, how many people
I see.
use the castle, the chapel. First, to become a prisoner, it was during the war, where the army captured them, and then they were sent into other camps. There were different camps in Germany. First of all, it's independent on time and place that officers are in extra camps on soldiers. And so there were Stammlager, these were the camps for the soldiers. There were Oflag officers' camp. There were Dulag, Durchgangslager, this is a passing camp, passings only for some days, and Vorlag, Frontlager, camp near the front.